Great, thank you very much. So we now have the opportunity for you all to ask questions. We have 2 microphones here. If you'd like to ask a question, please get my attention and introduce yourself. Tell us what organization you're with, and please do make sure there's a question mark at the end of your short statement. So, yes, sir, right here on the aisle.
Thank you very much for a wonderful report. My name is Nick Kessler, Navy reservist with Vet Impact, helping veterans create businesses in post-conflict countries, much like Afghanistan, Remy Spice, combat flip-flops, that sort of stuff. Questions quickly that I've got. One, we're looking at this from a whole of government approach, so from the public sector side, government, and what we can do. Would love your thoughts, though, regarding how civilian harm really works into economic opportunity as well, both during conflict and post-conflict reconstruction. And then how that really ties into any relationships we have through public-private partnerships with private industry in order to help the reconstruction efforts. And then lastly, based on this report and everything you've seen, sir, over since 2009 especially, and ma'am, Michelle, from what your standpoint was, do we see this as a shift in how the national military strategy actually works to support our national security strategy overall? And then any lessons learned then regarding how we actually work this post-conflict?
Nick, thanks for some great questions. Whenever you apply military force in a combat zone, it's going to have effects on the civilian population. It's going to have effects on the broader political, social, economic dynamics. Unless you are in a situation like Gulf War I, where you have massed armored formations in the middle of an unpopulated desert, then the consequences of civilian harm are going to be much less because of the environment that you're operating in. But that's a fairly unique, maybe one percentile environment for conflict. What we've seen, certainly since September 11th, but also more broadly, is these military operations. Wars are taking place within populated environments, and I know growing up in the military, one of the things that we were taught as we're putting together strategies and operations for how you succeed in a conflict is you have to manage the interplay between achieving military objectives and protecting your own force. And sometimes there's very painful trade-offs, but the part of the art of command was to achieve your objectives in ways that you're protecting your own force. So you're using your force and your capabilities smartly. And I think what this report shows is that sort of view of what we ask commanders to do, and that view of the art of command is needs updating, is not needs to be supplemented. And I think it needs to be supplemented with a third component, which is civilian protection, because civilians have agency on the battlefield, and commanders, as we saw in Afghanistan, commanders have to manage the interplay between military objectives, force protection, and civilian protection, because all of these are interacting in ways that affect the environment and at the strategic level are affecting our ability to achieve our aims. So in terms of how do we shift leader education, how do we shift development of leaders across the government, I think it's widening the aperture of how we view the art of employing U.S. military capabilities across the government, and seeing it in terms of the interplay of these different variables.
I would just add that I think to the last piece of the question, as I understood it, I think that we tend, when we use the military instrument in a major way, as in Afghanistan, we tend to understandably focus in a very fine grain on the details of the military aspects of the campaign. And too often that becomes the shiny object in the interagency discussions, and we spend too little time discussing what Ambassador Cunningham, was concerned with in Afghanistan, which is, once you have some degree of military success on the ground, creating a more secure, stable environment, how do you then take that last 20 yards to actually translate that success in the security domain into your ultimate political objectives? And I think that gets to the other instruments of power and the fact that we tend to not pay enough attention to those elements of strategy, but we also, as a government, as a nation, don't fully resource those instruments. And so, I've watched a number of integrated plans, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan, be beautifully designed and integrated and then sent up to the Hill for funding, and they come back with the military piece 100% funded and the state and the diplomatic and development piece is grossly underfunded, and so the whole plan sort of falls apart or is suboptimal. So I think we have a long way to go in that last 20 to 30% of translating tactical and operational military success or progress into the actual achievement of our objectives, and having a clear enough picture of that to then have that also inform how we're conducting the military operations in the first place.